Chairman Shannon, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Ranking Member Brady, members of the subcommittee, it's a pleasure to appear before you today. My role in this hearing might seem a bit anomalous, as I'm not a trade expert, but an expert on defense and security affairs. But that dimension of the transatlantic relationship and the economic and trade relationship, I would argue, is inextricably intertwined. It has been so from the beginning, and I think in the current era of globalization, it has become ever more so. Let me touch a bit on that, and to start with, first of all, the premise that the chairman and the committee announcements of the hearing put forward, which is that NATO's funding principles, particularly Article 2 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the Treaty of Washington of 1949, put forward the very basic and fundamental principles that the alliance was about defending fundamental principles, including the promotion of the stability and prosperity of its members, the elimination of conflict in their international economic policies, and economic collaboration. And all of those remain inextricably linked to NATO's current activities in the defense and military sector. But in this era of globalization, as I say, I think military security and economic security have become ever more closely intertwined. And while NATO is certainly not going to be ever used as a focal point or as a main venue for transatlantic consultations on trade and economic integration, because clearly other institutions have evolved and were designed to develop and to deal with those problems, as some of my fellow panelists have articulated. But there are some elements of NATO structures that are making modest contributions to the promotion of transatlantic trade and economic cooperation, particularly in the defense sector. And some of those institutions also need to be, elements of NATO cooperation need to be aware of the overall economic condition of member states and how that is going to impact and is impacting today their capabilities to undertake their defense and security commitments. Many members of NATO and the EU today, of course, are grappling with mounting debt and financial volatility that are leading to cuts in governmental spending across the board. And this is already beginning to hit in the defense and security sector, as many of you members of the committee know well. In that context, the NATO allies are going to have to be ever more mindful of these fiscal realities that are confronting the members as they consider defense plans, and to ensure that NATO policies and procedures both bolster and support economic cooperation, but also are aware of the limits of various member states. And here is an area where I think also, as you look at this notion that is gaining traction in NATO today, as they look at dealing with the renewal of some of their forces, modernization, dealing with the recapitalization of forces that have seen a great deal of wear and tear in the context particularly of the operations in Afghanistan, as they move forward, how can they do more with less? And a key element of that will be enhanced transatlantic defense cooperation in both procurement and defense trade. And here it's important that as the deepening of transatlantic trade and defense cooperation goes forward, and there are some areas that are certainly under consideration here in the committee and elsewhere of how that could be enhanced, I think that we will see that that can be an important way in which the enhancement of the relations in the trade and economic area can support and undergird the security relationship. NATO does have several committees, though, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, that are contributing to elements of transatlantic trade and economic cooperation in the narrow band that they operate in, that is in the area of defense cooperation. NATO has an economic committee which does studies for the Secretary General and members of the Council of NATO that looks at the various economic conditions of countries and their ability to meet their defense commitments. It examines the overall health of the alliance's defense industrial base, and it makes recommendations on how that can be strengthened. The Committee on National Armaments, the Conference of National Armaments Directors, the CNAD, is also an important body within NATO that plays an important role in facilitating and advancing transatlantic defense cooperation and also in promulgating and promoting standards that are an important part of enhancing defense industrial cooperation and transatlantic defense trade. Finally, the Standardization Organization and its various subsidiary bodies in NATO also are very important and promoting the standardization that allows NATO forces to work together as effectively as they do, but they also cooperate with a number of civil organizations, such as the European Committee for Standardization and the National Institute of Standards, in advancing standards that will help eliminate non-tariff barriers to trade in the defense sector, and that also help disseminate defense and technological advances. So NATO, in that small area of its remit, is, I think, making some contributions to transatlantic trade, promotion, and development. Now, I point out that, in addition, it's important to consider how the hard security, the military elements of the alliance, are contributing to maintaining transatlantic and global trade. And I note, and I would just note in passing to wrap up, that we have to be mindful also, of course, that the regional instability and the growth of new threats to trade, particularly in the maritime domain, have led to new missions for the alliance. And it's easy to forget, in the context of this huge and overarching operation in Afghanistan, that NATO is also engaged in two maritime security operations, one active endeavor in the Mediterranean, which has been underway since late 2001, right after the 9/11 attacks, which is a maritime surveillance and intercept operation designed to ensure the security of maritime commerce against various terrorist threats in the Mediterranean region. So, too, NATO is involved right now at the request of the United Nations and the World Food Program in dealing with piracy in the Gulf of Aden, a vital shipping lane through which about 4% of world oil flows come through every day. So NATO's activities, working, I would note, with an EU force and other elements of the international community, is playing an important role in providing for the security of maritime commerce. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this opportunity to lay out some of these considerations, and I hope that we can return to some of these factors in this sort of cross-cutting discussion of how the security and defense domain relate to the health of the overall transatlantic economic relationship. Thank you very much.